Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about gardening, botanical history, and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is May 6th, and there are just 45 days until the first day of summer. Today we celebrate the botanist who discovered the function of leaves. And we'll also learn about a visionary German naturalist and polymath who recognized the power and complexity of nature as he explored Central and South America. We'll hear an excerpt about the power of gardening to turn a gardener into a philosopher. And we grow that garden library today with a book about the best way, the very best way, to cook vegetables from the garden. This is a cookbook that teaches how to make individual vegetables shine. And it's a cookbook that every vegetable gardener should have in their kitchen. And then we'll wrap things up with a fun little story about the winning entry at the 1917 Raisin Day Parade. But first, here's today's curated news. Today's curated news comes to us from Agri-News. It was written by Mark Kennedy, and the title of the post is "A Farmer to Chef Reveals His Deep Vegetable Knowledge." Well, I fell in love with this post when I read about it, and it's perfect for today's show, where we're going to be talking about a cookbook that tells us how to best prepare food from our garden harvest. Now, this particular post from Mark Kennedy features Farmer Lee Jones. And Mark starts his article out by sharing a fascinating story about an experience that Farmer Lee had with beets. And I wanted to share it with you really quick, and then you can read the rest of this fantastic article for yourself. So it starts out this way. Farmer Lee Jones had planted too many beets, and the surplus was dumped in a pile in a cooler. He returned later to find that when he dug below the very first layer to where the beets got no light exposure, beautiful leaves were growing out of the vegetable in the dark. He says, "It's a yellow leaf with red veins. And it's one of the sexiest things that you can imagine." We're like, holy smokes, this is nicer than anything we grew on purpose. Now, you might not find plants particularly sexy until you speak to Jones and catch his infectious enthusiasm for farming. He's a relentless experimenter, willing to try new techniques, new ideas, and new flavors. He says there are literally thousands of plants and vegetables to be explored. And we have a saying that we try to work in harmony with Mother Nature rather than trying to outsmart her. Well, I tell you what, this article is fantastic. If you liked the beet story, you're going to love the entire rest of this article. It's definitely worth checking out in the Facebook group for the show. All you need to do to find it is head on over to the group, go up to the top, you'll see a little magnifying glass, search for the word vegetable, and this post by Mark Kennedy will pop right up. Now, if you're not in the group, you have a standing invitation. You can join at any time. And again, it is so easy to join this group. All you need to do is head on up to the search bar where you might be searching for an old high school friend, and instead type in the words Daily Gardener Community and then request to join, and then I'll admit you into the group. And it's just that easy. And I can't wait to meet you there. All right, it's time for today's botanical history. Here's botanical history for today, May 6th. Today is the birthday of Jean Senebier, a Swiss pastor and botanist. He was born on this day, May 6th, in 1742. Where would we be without John Senebier? still breathing, but lacking the knowledge that carbon dioxide is consumed by plants, and in turn, that plants produce oxygen as part of the process of photosynthesis. In a nutshell, Senebier's work was crucial because he had learned the function of leaves, capturing carbon for food. Before Senebier, the purpose of leaves and what they did for plants and people was unknown. It was Jean Senebier who said, "Observation and experiment are two sisters who help each other." And it was on this day, May 6th, in 1859, that the naturalist and botanist Alexander von Humboldt died. He was 89 years old. When it came to his expeditions, Alexander didn't travel alone. In 1799, Alexander was accompanied by the French botanist Aimé Bonpland. In 1806, Friedrich Georg Veitch painted Alexander's portrait. This was 2 years after he'd returned from his 5-year research trip through Central and South America. Friedrich painted a romantic, idealized vista of Ecuador as the setting for Alexander's painting. Alexander had climbed the Chimborazo mountain in Ecuador, believed at the time to be the highest mountain in the world. So perhaps Friedrich imagined Alexander to be viewing the landscape from Chimborazo. Surrounded by a jungle paradise, a large palm shades Alexander's resting spot. In the painting, a very handsome Alexander is seated on a large boulder. His top hat is resting upside down on the boulder behind him, and Friedrich shows the 37-year-old Alexander wearing a puffy shirt that would make Seinfeld jealous, a pink-orange vest, and tan breeches. In Alexander's lap, he's holding open a large leather-bound flora that he's working on, and in his right hand, he has a specimen of Rexia speciosa, which today we know as Mariania speciosa. A large barometer leans against the boulder in the lower left-hand corner of the painting, and that little instrument symbolizes Alexander's dedication to measuring environmental data while collecting and describing plants. King Ferdinand was so pleased with the portrait of Alexander that he hung it in the Berlin Palace. In fact, he ordered 2 more paintings to be made featuring Alexander's time in the Americas. Alexander was a polymath. He made contributions across many of the sciences. He made a safety lamp for miners. He discovered the Peru current, known as the Humboldt current. He believed South America and Africa had been joined together geographically at one time, and he named the torrid zone, the area of the Earth near the equator. Now, since Alexander spent a great deal of time in this part of the world, very near the equator, he knew just how hot and sweltering the weather could be in the torrid zone. And so the torrid zone is appropriately named because torrid means hot, blistering, or scorching. Alexander also spent some time in Russia while he was alive, and it was there that Alexander predicted the location of the very first Russian diamond deposits. Alexander was also a pragmatist. It was the great Alexander von Humboldt who said, "Spend for your table less than you can afford, for your house rent just what you can afford, and for your dress more than you can afford." And every time I think about that quote, I think back to that portrait of Alexander and his puffy shirt and the orange vest and how wonderful he looks. And it's very clear that the way he looked was very important to him. Now, Alexander was a thinker, and he developed his own theory for the web of life. He wrote, "The aims that I strive for are an understanding of nature as a whole, proof of the working together of all the species of nature." In 1803, in Mexico, Alexander wrote, "Everything is interaction." It's time for today's Unearthed Words. Today's Unearthed Words come to us from Ray Bradbury, the American author and screenwriter. This is an excerpt from his book, Dandelion Wine. Lilacs on a bush are better than orchids, and dandelions and devilgrass are better. Why? Because they bend you over and turn you away from all the people in the town for a little while and sweat you and get you down where you remember you got a nose again. And when you're all to yourself that way, you're really proud of yourself for a little while. You get to thinking things through alone. Gardening is the handiest excuse for being a philosopher. Nobody guesses, nobody accuses, nobody knows. But there you are, Plato in the peonies, Socrates force growing his own hemlock. A man toting a sack of blood manure across his lawn is kin to Atlas, letting the world spin easy on his shoulder. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Eating from the Ground Up by Alana Chernilla. This book came out in 2018, and the subtitle is Recipes for Simple, Perfect Vegetables, a cookbook. In this book, Alana says vegetables keep secrets, and to prepare them well, we need to know how to coax those secrets out. Alana divides her cookbook into these key sections. Barely recipes, meaning recipes that really let the vegetables shine. These generally have few ingredients. A pot of soup, so great soups to make with vegetables, one of my favorite sections. Too hot to cook, warmth and comfort, and celebrations and other excuses to eat with your hands. I love those sections. Alana's cookbook was inspired by the question, but what's the best way to eat a radish? Alana was at a booth at a farmer's market. Here's what she wrote. One side of the table held a tower of radish bunches, and the other a basket of bagged baby arugula. When my first customer held a bunch of radishes and asked me for direction, I did my best to answer. Throw them into a salad? Slice them up and dip them into hummus? Not enamored with her lackluster response, Alana went home and experimented. She writes, "Next Saturday, when someone asked me my favorite way to eat a radish, I was ready. Make radish butter, chop them up fine, and fold them into soft butter with some crunchy salt, parsley, and a little lemon juice. I think the whole town ate radish butter that week. Each week that first summer, I'd take vegetables home from one market to prepare for the next, studying up for the following week's questions. The result was this cookbook. Isn't that fantastic? This book is 272 pages of vegetable mastery in the kitchen. You can get a copy of Eating from the Ground Up by Alana Chernilla and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $5. But I just want to warn you, there are not many copies at that price point. So if this cookbook sounds fantastic to you, you're going to want to jump on that offer. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, May 6th, in 1917, that the Fresno Morning Republican shared a full-page story about the raisin industry. The Raisin Day Parade had been held the previous week, and the winning entry was a series of 5 floats that told the story of the 40-year-old raisin industry. Here's an excerpt. The first float showed the pioneer and his family after their journey from the east to the fertile valley of the San Joaquin. The pioneer's vision was portrayed by a float in advance. Then came the realization of his vision with the little home and the raisin grapevines. But there was no organization, no cooperative marketing, and each grower sold his crop to the packer or marketed his own crop. Disaster came, and the third float denoted poverty. The vineyard was mortgaged and sold by the sheriff. The fourth float portrayed prosperity. The businessman, grower, and the laborer were linked together for better conditions. And then the fifth float denoted the rest of the cooperation and wealth to the vineyardist. The original Sun-Made Raisin Girl, Miss Lorraine Collette, was on this float. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove and Wyoming, Minnesota. If you want to read today's show notes, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. And don't forget that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can always get in touch by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.